It was the coldest night Jack had seen in years. The wind howled through the trees like a pack of hungry wolves. His small wooden house creaked under the pressure of the snowstorm. The fire in his living room crackled, and he was just about to sip his hot coffee when he heard it, a strange soft sound coming from the barn. Not a wolf, not a fox, not any sound he knew. It was like a cry, weak and shaking. He froze, listening again. There it was, a whimper, and then something like a baby's cough. Jack stood up, grabbed his coat, flashlight, and boots. He opened the door, and the cold slapped him in the face. Still, he ran through the snow toward the barn, heart racing. He opened the heavy barn door, slowly, and the flashlight's beam moved across the hay. Empty stalls, quiet sheep, hanging tools. Then he saw her, in the far corner. Curled up against the wall was a woman. Not a normal woman. Her skin was a soft blue-gray, almost glowing. Her eyes were shut tight, and in her arms a tiny baby lay almost lifeless. Both were wrapped in thin silver cloth, shaking, barely alive. Jack stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching on the frozen floor. The alien woman flinched, pulling the baby closer like a wild animal. He raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe here." She didn't answer, but her breathing slowed just a little. Jack took off his coat and placed it over her shoulders. The baby made a small noise, like a squeak. The sound hit Jack right in the heart. He crouched down and looked at the baby. Its tiny fingers were blue. "It couldn't be more than a few weeks old," Jack whispered. "You're freezing." He wrapped the baby in his scarf and gently picked them both up. They were so light, like they hadn't eaten in days. Inside the house, he placed them near the fire and rushed to get blankets. The woman tried to speak, but only a dry whisper came out. Her eyes searched his face as if asking, "Why?" Jack lit another log and put warm water on the stove. He gave the baby a few drops with a spoon, and the tiny mouth moved slowly. The woman watched, tears forming in her glowing eyes. She pointed to her chest and said something Jack didn't understand. Then she pointed to the baby, then to her lips, then held her hands out. Jack got it. She couldn't feed her child. He looked through his kitchen and found a bottle from long ago, still sealed. He filled it with warm milk and gave it to the baby. The little one drank slowly, then faster, then fell asleep in Jack's arms. The woman let out a shaky breath and leaned her head against the chair. Her body trembled from cold and fear. Jack wrapped another blanket around her and sat beside her. "You'll be okay now," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." She looked at him, confused. Maybe she didn't know those words, or maybe no one had ever said them to her before. Outside, the wind still screamed, but inside the cabin was warmth. Jack didn't ask questions, not yet. He just knew they needed help, and he was the only one around for miles. But as he looked out the window into the dark woods, a strange light flickered in the distance. Blue and red, blinking in a pattern too perfect to be natural. Something or someone was looking for them. Jack's jaw tightened. He had a feeling that saving this mother and child was only the beginning, and whatever came next, he was ready to face it. The snow kept falling through the night, covering everything in a thick white blanket. Inside the cabin, Jack stayed awake near the fire. Watching the two strangers sleep, the baby now breathed steadily, wrapped in warm cloth and Jack's old flannel shirt. The alien mother lay nearby, her body still weak, but no longer shaking. Jack didn't even know her name, but he felt something strange in his chest, like he was meant to find them. In the early morning light, Jack stepped outside quietly. He shoveled a path to the barn and checked for any signs. But the snow had covered everything, hiding even the footprints from the night before. Still, something didn't sit right in his mind. That blinking light in the woods, was it still out there? He returned to the cabin with fresh water and a basket of food. The woman was awake now, sitting up slowly, her eyes alert but wary. Jack spoke gently. Pointing to the bread and fruit, "Eat," he said. "It's safe." She stared at the food, then at him. and finally took a piece with shaking fingers. She tore off a small bite and gave the rest to her baby first. Jack smiled, noticing the way she always fed the child before herself. After breakfast, she tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Jack caught her before she hit the floor. She gasped and pulled away, but he held up his hands again. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," he said softly. She nodded slowly, sitting down again. Jack handed her a pen and paper, hoping she could write. But she looked confused. Maybe her language wasn't the same. Instead, she reached into the thin cloth that wrapped her and pulled out a small metal tag. She held it out with both hands, her eyes pleading. Jack took it, examining the strange silver object. It blinked with a soft red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly, her hand shot out and pointed to the fire. She wanted him to destroy it. Jack hesitated, feeling the metal buzz slightly in his fingers. This was no ordinary target with some kind of alien tracker. Without wasting another second, he tossed it into the fire. The flames flared blue for a moment, then swallowed the tag hole. The woman closed her eyes and let out a breath of relief. But far away, deep in the forest, a silent signal blinked out and something big woke up. Later, Jack set up a makeshift bed in the barn's hayloft. He moved tools aside, cleaned the space, and laid out blankets and pillows when he returned to the house. The woman was rocking the baby gently. He pointed to the door and motioned for her to follow. Carefully, she stepped outside, shielding the baby from the wind. When she saw the space he had prepared in the barn, she froze. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gently lowered the baby onto the blankets. She turned to Jack, and for the first time, she smiled. It was small, broken, but full of thanks. Jack scratched the back of his neck, unsure how to respond. He muttered, "It's not much, but it's warm." She pointed to her chest and then to him, tapping her fingers gently, maybe a thank you in her language. Jack nodded. "You're welcome." As night returned, Jack kept the fire burning in both the house and the barn. He brought soup, baby clothes from storage, and a heater powered by his old solar panels. She watched him closely, every move he made, not with fear, but curiosity, like she was trying to understand him. In return, Jack studied her too. Her arms had faint glowing lines, like tattoos that moved when she breathed. The baby had the same lines, softer but pulsing with life. Who were they? Why were they hiding? And why did someone from another world end up freezing in his barn? Jack knew one thing: this wasn't over. He didn't care if the government came, or if aliens landed in his fields. He wasn't giving them up. He had lived alone for years, but now, for the first time, he felt like he had something worth protecting. And just before he went to sleep, he looked out his window again. The trees stood still, but a flicker of red moved between them, watching, waiting. Something was coming. And Jack had no idea if he was ready for it before the sun rose. Jack was already dressed in layers and boots. The alien woman, still weak, pointed to the forest and drew a shaky shape in the dirt, an oval. With cracks and fire lines, she made a crashing sound and motioned again. Jack understood her ship had fallen there. She touched her heart, then the baby, then the direction of the forest. Jack nodded and packed a bag. He checked the shotgun by the door, then left it behind. He didn't want to scare her. He only took a flashlight, rope, gloves, and some tools. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped into the woods. The air was bitter cold, and the trees stood tall and silent. After half an hour of walking, he saw it metal twisted around black trees. A deep ditch had formed where the object hit, carving a path through the forest. The crash site was mostly hidden by snow. But the shape was too strange to miss. Jack stepped down into the frozen trench. Steam still rose from some broken panels. He saw parts that looked like smooth bone, others like melted glass. This was no human craft. He found what looked like a seat and a control panel with blinking blue lights. Wires ran like veins across the walls. Near the back, a broken hatch hung open. Inside were metal crates. One of them cracked. Jack peeked inside and saw small containers, baby food, medical packs, and a torn cloth with a symbol. It looked like a crown made of stars. He gently rolled the cloth and took it with him. Then he found something else, silver pod with clear casing. It was empty, but had a cradle shape. This must have been the baby's survival pod. The screen showed a name in alien letters and a green, pulsing line. Jack didn't know what it said, but it felt important. Suddenly, a high-pitched beep came from deeper inside the ship. He turned quickly and saw a small orb blinking red. He backed away slowly, heart racing, whatever that was. It didn't want visitors. Jack returned home an hour later, shivering, his hands red from cold. He laid the items on a cloth in front of the alien woman. When she saw the torn symbol, she covered her mouth, eyes wide. She looked at him, then at the baby, and touched the cloth gently. Jack sat beside her. "This was yours, wasn't it?" She didn't speak, but tears rolled down her cheeks. She took a stick and started drawing in the dirt. A circle, a triangle, 3 dots, then a cross over all of it. Then she pointed to herself and the baby, and made a motion like running. Jack understood her home was destroyed. And she escaped with the baby. She tapped the baby's chest, and then the back of her own neck. Jack leaned closer and noticed something glowing faintly on her skin. He fetched his old junk scanner from the garage. It beeped once, then showed Shape's digital code embedded under her skin. She had something inside her data, memories, something powerful. Jack ran the scanner over the baby and saw a similar light. Not just mother and child, they were both carrying something someone wanted to erase. Jack leaned back and breathed deep. He realized they weren't just survivors. They were carrying secrets of a dying world, and someone had followed them to Earth that night. Jack installed an old camera on the barn roof. He watched the screen flicker as it showed trees and snow. But near the edge of the image, a shape moved slow. Silent, a drone, small and black, hovering just above the ground. Jack's stomach turned cold. They were being watched. He rushed to the barn and whispered to the alien woman, "We don't have much time." She looked up, fear in her eyes, and held the baby close. But Jack wasn't going to run. Not yet. He looked around at his tools, his home, his land. If someone wanted that baby, they'd have to come through him first. He whispered to himself, "This is my barn, my land, and now, my family." And somewhere beyond the forest, the hunter had just found the trail. The next morning, Jack didn't open the barn door right away. He stood inside his kitchen, watching the monitor connected to the old roof camera. Snow still fell softly, but the drone was gone, vanished like smoke. But Jack knew better. It hadn't left. It was hiding, waiting, watching in the barn. The alien mother sat near the heater, holding her baby close. She hadn't slept much. Her eyes red and heavy, but she looked up when Jack entered. He gave her a soft smile and handed her warm tea. She nodded in thanks, still not speaking. Jack pointed to the scanner on the table, then pointed to her neck. He raised his eyebrows as if asking for permission. She paused, then slowly turned her head and brushed her silver hair aside. Jack gently held the scanner to the back of her neck. It blinked green, and small lines of alien code appeared on the screen. Jack stared at its rows and rows of glowing symbols. He didn't understand the language, but he could tell it was alive, like it was moving, updating. Storing something, he scanned her arms, her back, and her palms. Each time, the same result data, everywhere. She reached for the scanner, touched the screen, and drew a circle. Then she pointed to the baby and drew another, smaller circle. She connected them with a line and placed her hand on her heart. Jack understood. The baby was connected to her not just by blood, but by memory. He sat down slowly, trying to process what all of it meant. The woman looked around, then pointed to the ground. She traced the shape of a tree, then a planet, then an explosion. Then she pointed to her own body, and finally made a small box shape in the air. A memory vault, that's what she was. A living recorder of a lost world. Jack leaned back, exhaling through his nose. he whispered. "You were supposed to protect something, weren't you?" She didn't speak, but her eyes answered yes. The baby let out a soft coo, and Jack's eyes softened. That little one. It's more important than we both know. He went back to the house and opened his old toolbox. Inside was a device he'd used once before, an old signal jammer. He powered it up and placed it near the barn. If the drones were scanning, this might block their feed, or at least buy them time. That night, he made dinner and brought it to the barn. Warm soup, fresh bread, and mashed vegetables for the baby. He sat with them in silence, watching the flames dance in the small heater. The woman finally placed her hand on his and whispered, "Selah." Jack blinked. "Selah? Is that your name?" She nodded slowly, then pointed to the baby and whispered, "Aliyah." Jack smiled gently, repeating the names aloud. Selah. Aliyah. Beautiful, soft, like music from another world. He looked at them and said, "I'm Jack." She nodded. Saying it softly, "Jack," it sounded strange in her voice, but full of trust. Suddenly, the baby's wrist began to glow. A soft, pulsing light blinked under her skin. Selah gasped and held the baby close, trying to cover the light. Jack leaned in and saw the faint shape of a symbol, some kind of beacon. The pod must have restarted the signal. Someone would find them again. Jack stood up and turned off all lights. He told Selah to stay low and held the baby as she cried softly. They couldn't move, yet was too cold, and the baby was too weak. But they couldn't wait much longer either. Jack made a decision. "I'll go back to your ship tomorrow," he said. "There has to be something. There's something we can use to protect you." Selah looked terrified, but Jack gave her a calm nod. "I won't leave you for long," he promised, "but we need answers." That night, Jack slept on a hay pile with a blanket and a shotgun nearby. He kept one eye open, one ear listening for the hum of drones. Selah slept lightly, her body curled protectively around her daughter. The barn was quiet, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was waiting. Outside, in the far woods, a red lens blinked once, then vanished into the dark. Jack woke before the sun, his body stiff from sleeping on hay. He checked the camera feed, nothing but trees and snow. But his gut told him the silence wouldn't last. The baby's beacon had activated again. Time was running out. He made a quick breakfast, dry toast, and hot tea, and handed it to Selah. She accepted it with tired eyes. Aliyah was fussing, her tiny hands glowing faintly under the blankets. Jack wrapped her in extra layers, rubbing her fingers gently. She needed real shelter, real warmth, not just a barn. "I'm taking you both to a safer place," he said. Selah looked confused, so he pointed to the truck outside, then to her and the baby, making a driving motion. She shook her head fast, eyes full of fear. She pointed to the woods, then to herself, and made a cutting motion across her neck. "Danger, someone was out there." Jack nodded. "I know," but he also knew staying meant death. He ran to the house and grabbed fuel, batteries, baby food, the blanket sewn long ago by his mother. He tossed it all into the back of his old rusted truck. The engine coughed, then roared to life. It hadn't moved in weeks, but today it had no choice. He wrapped Aliyah tightly in the blanket, her soft whimpers barely rising over the engine sound. Selah climbed into the front seat, clutching her child with one arm and the side door with the other. Jack drove slow at first, the tires sliding slightly on the ice-covered path. The snow was deep, and branches cracked under the weight of cold wind. But ahead lay the old ranger's cave, hidden inside a mountain ridge. No drones, no signals. No metal, just rock and silence. They had used it before years ago, when storms blocked the main roads. Jack remembered every turn, every tree, every bump, but halfway down the path, his heart dropped. He saw something in the rearview mirror. A black dot in the sky, following them. "Hold on," he whispered, pressing the gas. The truck bounced over rocks and frozen roots. Branches scratched the sides like claws. Aliyah began to cry, and Selah whispered something soothing in her native tongue. The dot grew closer, faster. It wasn't a bird, it was a drone. Jack pulled the wheel hard and turned onto an older trail. Nearly forgotten, he drove up a hill, through thick trees, mud spraying behind the tires, but the drone was smart at adjusted. Hovered and blinked red. Then it opened a small compartment and a spark shot out, a warning or a weapon. Jack reached under the seat and grabbed a flare gun. One shot, that's all he had. He told Sayla to shield the baby, opened the window, aimed at the sky, and fired. The flare hit the drone, which burst into sparks and spun wildly before vanishing into the trees. Smoke rose behind them. Jack didn't wait to see if it was dead. He pushed the truck faster, steering toward the stone ridge. By the time they reached the cave, the baby had stopped crying, but Sayla looked pale. Her eyes locked on the smoke trail far behind. They stepped into the cave, darkness swallowing them. Jack turned on a small lantern and cleared out the old blankets and supplies he'd left years ago. Sayla lay Alaya on a soft pile of cloth, checking her breathing. Jack moved to the entrance and began stacking large rocks, closing them in. Hiding the light, they would rest here, maybe for a day, then figure out the next step. Sayla sat down beside Jack, her body trembling, not from cold, but from memory. She showed him the pod fragment she had saved. It pulsed with weak light. If they could repair it, it could hold the baby in stasis until rescue came. Jack studied the inside of the pod, thinking, planning, he could try to fix it. But he'd need parts from the wreck, maybe from his own tools. Sayla placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was soft, broken, but clear. You help, even when afraid. Jack looked at her and smiled. Everyone's afraid, he whispered. But not everyone chooses to care. In that moment, something changed between them. Not just fear, not just survival, but trust. Real, fragile trust, born in fire and ice. Outside the cave, the snow had stopped, but far in the sky, a second drone had just awakened. This one was bigger, and it didn't come alone. Inside the cave, the silence felt heavy. Jack sat near the firelight. Working with wires and broken pieces of alien tech, the damaged pod glowed weakly beside him. Sayla watched from the corner, holding Alaya in her arms. Her eyes stayed fixed on Jack. But her thoughts were somewhere far away. Almost done, Jack muttered. Connecting the last circuit, he flipped a switch, and the pod hummed gently. Not perfect, but enough to keep the baby stable in case they had to move fast again. Sayla nodded with a grateful look, then placed a soft kiss on Alaya's forehead. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly. Dust fell from the cave ceiling, and the fire flickered low. Jack froze, listening. A second tremor, then a high-pitched humming sound. He rushed to the entrance, peeking between the rocks he had stacked. His heart sank. A large black ship hovered above the trees, scanning with red lights, bigger than the drone, sleeker, dead silent. Troops in silver armor stepped out, moving through the snow like shadows. Jack backed away, breath tight in his chest. Sayla stood, clutching the baby, her face pale. Jack whispered, "They found us." She nodded slowly, her hands shaking. Then she did something Jack didn't expect. She placed Alaya in his arms. "Hide her," she said, in a soft but firm voice. "What?" No way," Jack replied. "We stayed together," but Sayla looked into his eyes. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was calm, clear. "If they catch me, they search me," she said, pointing to her body. "Data here," she added, touching her chest. "Baby must live." Jack held Alaya tightly, not knowing what to say. Sayla stepped toward the cave opening, her footsteps slow but steady. She stopped and looked back one last time. "You saved us," she whispered. "Now I save you." Before Jack could stop her, she stepped into the snow, hands raised. The troops pointed weapons at her but didn't fire. One of them stepped forward, a tall figure with golden armor and sharp glowing eyes. He spoke in a deep alien voice. Full of command, Sayla answered him with quiet strength. Inside the cave, Jack held Alaya close, rocking her gently. She whimpered softly, confused by the silence. Jack didn't know if Selah was buying them time or walking into a trap. But he couldn't let her sacrifice be for nothing. Then came the voice, booming and cold, human. "We know you are here." The golden figure raised a device, and the rocks over the cave began to lift slowly. Jack whispered, "I'm sorry," then placed the baby in the pod and pressed the cover shut. The pod sealed with a soft hiss. Hiding her heartbeat, hiding her light, the opening widened, and two armored aliens stepped inside. Jack stood with empty hands, eyes full of fire. "Where's the child?" the golden one demanded. Jack stayed silent. A soldier grabbed him roughly, throwing him to the ground. But he didn't look away, didn't show fear. Selah shouted something in her language, stepping between them. The commander pushed her aside and activated a scanner. It beeped wildly near her chest, the memory code still inside her. He raised his weapon and pointed it at her. "Give it," he said. Selah closed her eyes, breathing slow. Then, with a sudden motion, she touched her wrist and activated a hidden control. The scanner in her body flared bright, overloading the device. The commander screamed, dropping the weapon as it burned his hand. Jack jumped to his feet and tackled one of the guards. A second flash of light shot from Selah's skin, an emergency defense pulse. The cave shook, and the roof cracked above them. "Run!" she shouted to Jack. He grabbed the pod, tucked it under his coat, and sprinted through a narrow side tunnel he had spotted earlier. Selah stayed behind, holding back the soldiers, giving them a chance. As Jack escaped into the cold forest, he heard one last sound, a roar, then silence. Hours later, Jack stood by a frozen river, Alaya still safe in the pod. He looked back at the mountains, smoke rising slowly into the sky. Selah was gone. But her choice had saved them, Jack whispered. She gave everything, and the baby, sleeping peacefully, didn't know she had just been saved by the bravest mother in two worlds. Weeks passed, and the snow began to melt. The cold grip of winter loosened its hold, and patches of green peeked through the frost. Jack stood on the porch of his farmhouse, holding a warm bottle in one hand. In the other arm, little Alaya slept peacefully, wrapped in the same stitched blanket Selah had held her in. He looked out at the field, quiet and calm now. The sky was clear, the wind gentle. But his heart still carried the storm. He remembered every second of that escape. Every moment of Selah's last stand. He had buried her message deep in the woods. Under stones and silence, she was gone. But she had not died in vain. Inside the house, warmth had returned. Jack had fixed up the guest room, now painted with soft colors and filled with toys he never thought he'd use again. Old childhood books lined the shelves, and the rocking chair beside the window creaked gently as he moved. Alaya grew stronger with each passing day, her eyes bright, her skin glowing faintly like her mother's. Sometimes she would reach for the window when the stars came out, as if searching for a familiar sky. Jack whispered stories to her every night, stories of brave mothers and quiet heroes, of kindness that didn't ask questions, of a woman who gave up everything to protect the only piece of her world left behind. He had learned to care for her slowly, step by step, bottles, diapers, all. Lullabiette was new to him, but he never complained. She never cried much, maybe because she sensed he was always near. Or maybe because a part of Selah lived inside her, guiding her gently. One day, while fixing the fence, Jack heard a noise overhead. He looked up and saw a silver shimmer in the sky, a quiet flash. Gone in seconds, it wasn't a plane. He stood still, waiting, watching. Then he went back to work, pretending he hadn't seen it, but that night, he double-checked the jammer near the barn and made sure the pod's beacon was off. He didn't know if they would ever come again. More soldiers, or maybe others from Selah's world. But he was ready, not with weapons, but with purpose. He would protect Alaya, always. Spring brought light to the land. Birds returned to the trees, and fresh flowers bloomed along the fence. Alaya took her first steps near the barn, laughing softly as Jack held her hands. She looked so much like her mother in that moment. Same eyes, same soft smile, same strength in her tiny steps. Jack built a small garden by the window. He planted herbs and fruit, just like Selah had once described in her drawings each evening. He would hold Alaya close and whisper her mother's name. "You are loved, little star," he'd say. "And you're not alone." One afternoon, while sorting through tools in the barn, Jack found something wrapped in cloth. It was the silver crown symbol from the wreckage, hidden under blankets. He placed it on a shelf beside the baby's first socks and Selah's drawing. A small shrine of memory and honor, not for aliens, but for family. Later that night, as stars filled the sky, Jack sat by the fire with Alaya on his lap. She looked up, pointed to the sky, and said a single word: "Home." Jack's breath caught. He looked at her, unsure if she understood what she said. But maybe she did. Maybe her heart remembered what her mind could not. He hugged her close and whispered back, "You're home now." And in that quiet moment, with stars above and warmth around them, the long winter finally ended. Not just outside, but inside him. He had lost much, but gained something deeper. Not just a child to protect, but a reason to live.